right, it's 10 o'clock here in the Netherlands. So I suggest we start, especially since we have the first people joining us already. So hello everyone. My name is Vincent van Beuzenkom. I'm COO at technologycatalog.com, and I'll be hosting this webinar today. I am joined today by Rowan Fenn from Rise-X and Huub Jansen from Woodside. And it's actually quite exciting because today we launch a new series of our webinars, which will be completely focused on presenting case studies. And today we have this combined case study from Rise-X and Woodside. So I'm glad to hand over to these gentlemen in a sec. Before I do so, just a quick practical note. So for the attendees, you will actually not have the option to speak during the webinar. But if you have any questions at any time for either Huub or for Rowan, you can just type them in the chat, and Rowan will be able to pick them up during the Q&A session at the end. So Rowan, Huub, I actually don't know who of you is going to kick off, so I'll just hand over to both of you. And yeah, looking forward to listening for this webinar myself.
All right, thank you very much, Vincent. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you who've taken the time to join us. Thank you very much for doing that. We very much appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here together today with Huub Jansen, who is a client of ours and someone we work with very closely at Woodside Energy. Today we'll cover, we'll take you through a use case where we use the Rise-X platform to help simplify, integrate, and optimize supply chain processes in the oil and gas sector. From an agenda perspective, what we will run through, so I'll hand over to Huub, who can give you a quick overview of Woodside Energy and in particular the Trion project that they're working on in the Gulf of Mexico, just to give you some sense of the context. We'll then look at some of the common challenges that Huub tackles on a day-to-day basis from a supply chain perspective. And then I'll talk a little bit about how we're using some of that technology or some of our technology to help address some of those supply chain challenges to deliver more integrated, more streamlined, more efficient supply chain in the oil and gas sector. We've got a short video at the back end just to bring some of this case study to life, which demonstrates the product that we've built together, which we will call SmartFlow. And then we'll run into the Q&A session at the end of that. Just by quick way of introduction, and then I'll hand across to Huub. So my name is Rowan Fenn. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Rise-X, and we build a software platform. It is a multi-party platform. We use AI and some other cool technology, in particular distributed ledger technology, to help quickly build and deploy business processes that cut across multiple stakeholders in a supply chain or in a value chain. So we're very, very focused on optimizing the flow of goods and services through networks of companies, rather than just focusing on improving processes within a single enterprise. With that, I'll hand across to Huub, who can give you a little bit of an overview of his role, but also the Trion project as well. Good, very early morning, Huub.
No worries at all. So my name is Huub Jansen. I'm the logistics manager for our Trion project, which is in the Gulf of Mexico, not in the Gulf of America, so still on the Mexico side, and it's close to the American border. As you can see, Woodside is the operator. It's a high capital project. We're building 2 floating facilities, one that will be permanently moored. And then we also will drill quite a few wells that will be over a duration of 2 to 5 years that we will finish them. But the facilities they are being constructed in Korea and China, but they will be hooked up late 27. They will be connecting 8 wells at that time, and then we can start producing. The project is and my role as logistics manager, I've been in logistics in oil and gas for more than 24 years. And all that experience is what I bring together over here. But I've worked in projects in Australia, in Europe, and in Africa, and now here. But I think the major challenge for the Trion project is it's quite remote. It's a 24-hour sailing with a boat from the nearest port that we could use. And then also in Mexico, it doesn't have a lot of deep water infrastructure or industry in that port as well. So there's a lot of new things for that area. And then also, I would say in Mexico there is they rely on a high amount of paperwork in their processes. If you talk about customs or if you talk about their logistics companies, they have some level of automation, but the automation is purely focused on finance processes or internal processes within those companies. Yeah.
Very good. The Huub's mission, should he choose to accept it. So if you look at Huub's role and you look at my perspective on Huub's role, I think logistics in a capital project is always a very exciting place to be, actually. And also very challenging, but also for the same reasons, very rewarding. I think if you look at that challenge at the highest level, you have to work with multiple companies across different parts of the world. So different jurisdictions that you've got to account for as you bring together goods and services, literally from all over the world into the US, into Houston, and then down into Mexico and out to the assets in the middle of the sea. Each of those companies, so all the companies that you're working with, have different systems, they have different processes, different practices, different cultures. And Huub's role, which is an envious one, is to coordinate and manage all those stakeholders to effectively, safely, effectively, and efficiently move billions of dollars of goods and services to the right place at the right time, while complying with international, regional, and local rules, and of course, an environment that's constantly changing. And I think if any of you are logistics professionals, I think you'll know that that's quite a thankless job. You've got to manage that complexity and also make sure that you are not the main cause of any cost or schedule overruns. In that context, I think there are a couple of challenges. We've tried to simplify those, but Huub, maybe you want to discuss some of the challenges you face as a logistics professional in that context and add some color, or as much color as you're prepared to add to some of those challenges as well.
Yeah, I think we've used Rise-X in the platform for several use cases. I think one of the earliest use cases was for fuel loadouts to our vessels in Australia. For the fuel loadouts, what we were facing there was it was a process that was covering multiple companies. So it was each of these companies had their own individual platforms, which was they were working individual, but there was also still some paperwork at the quayside where like a docket of the fuel delivery had to be done on a clipboard. And then that clipboard, all the docket with the red signature would go back into one of the organizations in SAP. Like oil and gas industries, they all try to build a whole castle around their own ERP system, so as SAP, so we don't like any integrations. The fuel company on the other side had something similar. And most of these processes were then managed via email as a result. In that process, we've been successfully working now for 4 or 5 years. We've streamlined that whole workflow using the platform. And I think the strength there from day one was actually the guys that were walking around with a clipboard in the field. They were so eager after the training to use it. The implementation was like smooth and effortless, which was surprising for somebody that most of these guys were working 20 years with the clipboard, and normally they are hard to change in their work practices. So that was a good example how we could use because that was spanning 3 or 4 different companies that had to do something to deliver that task. And when I let's say started here for Trion, you can imagine that we have more companies, but also new companies that maybe not have that level of automation. And then we also have a lot of government documents here that we need to prepare as well. So we're working on several use cases here where we are, let's say, making sure that all the documents that we would require for importing all these goods that we need to construct the facility, they will have to be loaded and be prepared in several customs and government portals. But also there's a lot of quality checks that we have to do internally before we would release those as well. So again, that's an example where we've stored them on the platform, and therefore we can also expose them to the several people in that bit. I think the one that is quite simple but has really helped us is more in the contract management. Rowan mentioned the amount of let's say money that flows through. If you compare that with maybe errors and mistakes, and then also with potential anti-bribery and corruption, there's a high level of, I would say, control needed. And that use case would be the invoices that we need to pay. So invoices normally need let's say, an evidence of work that's been done. And that work that's been done, again, quite often that's a timesheet, or that's a proof of delivery or something else that somebody would generate. Then somebody else would sign that at site. And then at some stage it would end up in the finance department of the contractor that would have delivered its services. And then that would then be attached to an invoice eventually. And then the expectation is that whoever clicks approve on the invoice would match that activity and those quantities together with what actually has happened. So what we've done there on the platform, we changed it around. We created a workflow where somebody in my team would plan the work ahead. Basically, we would list out all the stuff that we're doing. So we have included the planning step that would normally be somewhere else in the process. That would generate then like a work request, and that work request would then be accepted by the vendor, and that's pretty good, because sometimes at that stage the vendor can also see if they have the capacity or if the rates that we've applied are the right rates. So that's a pre-check before the invoicing stage. But then also we would do the track work and we would do the invoicing all on the same platform. But it started from there, and the information started with the planning phase, and it all filters through. So we have quite a few controls in place there, where now it becomes very easy at that end step. When I'm approving an invoice, I can see that the work was actually requested. I can also see that the work was actually tracked during the execution phase, because the timesheets and everything are electronic as well. And the proof of delivering of the goods or services. And then there is also like a finance steps where we prep for how it should be ingested into our finance system. So that could be the allocation of certain costs. So all of those things allows us to facilitate that flow. But yes, you can imagine, because everything is now data as well, it allows us to do more easy reporting. Because like we would like to report on stuff that we've planned in the finance world. So how much are you going to spend? And then how much did you spend already in the work, which we call for value work done. And then we would like to match it with the actual in the end. And that's sometimes there's a time span, if you think about payment terms and stuff like that, of 60 days payment terms and maybe 30 days after execution. So if you look at the time for checking, that could be a month or 2 months later. And then the actual payments that could be arriving could be another month or 2 months later. So that time span and the accuracy of the data, we have now high confidence in because of the workflow that we built on the tool. Yeah, that's an example. We're working on many other ones, because we are not trying to replace our applications that we already have in-house to facilitate certain in-house work processes. But what this actually does is it creates the glue in between, where we have processes that are maybe not completely written down, but they are like the process or workflows that we have between companies. And normally they are covered either via verbal conversations or via emails. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to make them more robust, but also especially in this world, create data so we can work on improvements, but we can also ensure that the quality of the data or the quality of the actions in the workflows is pretty high.
Cool. And while I have you and we have the time, I might take the opportunity to put you on the spot here. But one of the questions that I can imagine people are thinking of, and one of the questions we get all the time is, okay, so you've described something that sounds like a work request process. You've described something that sounds like tracking work, so timekeeping, reporting, and invoicing. You've described something that sounds like a logistics process when you're talking about managing inbound fuel. You're describing a number of other use cases. The question we'll get from end users, or the question we'll get from customers and clients is, but why can't I do this in SAP? Or why can't I do this in Ariba? And of course, I guess you guys already have all those systems. So from your perspective, what's different about Rise-X, and where does it play with those systems to help create value for you guys from a Woodside perspective?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I get it sometimes internally as well. It says, why are you going and get something else, or what are we doing on top? I think what people, let's say, maybe don't realize, there's a lot of other processes that or other process steps that are still outside, and most of these process steps we are happily accept that they are in email. For instance, because that's the way how we can communicate with other companies. I think in Ariba you could send, or in SAP you could open up certain portals and you could send it to one company, but then you cannot invite a third company or a fourth company to do another step as well. And in most of my supply chains or my bits, it's not just a one-to-one relationship. It's my company that initiates something, and then it's a subcontractor of a subcontractor that does something as well. And all those, let's say, that entire network, it cannot be exposed, let's say, in that one-to-one relationship. And what I said earlier as well, we don't like to open up quite a lot of our ERP systems for security reasons, and that creates some barriers there. But also, yeah, that makes people do. I would also say, because of all internal processes are also quite stagnant as well, so you cannot really tweak like little bits. It makes people do quite a lot of things outside of these systems as well, which I think is quite some leakage of controls that you can actually do in SAP if you would set them up, but because these applications are a little bit too slow or too big to change for simple things. Yeah, you have a whole, let's say, shadow world of spreadsheets and emails and everything else, and that's what we are trying to mitigate as well at the same time. So you're on mute.
Thanks, Huub. And hopefully that resonates with others on the call who are in a similar place or are in a similar role or position trying to deal with the same kinds of challenges. I might take an opportunity just to recap on some of those, and then I'll switch across. We'll talk a little bit about the platform itself and how it helps to address some of those challenges. So simplification, standardization, always a challenge, I think, in every company, not just an oil and gas company, but making things as simple as they need to be. Removing redundancy, plugging any gaps that exist in a process is an ongoing kind of organizational challenge, has been forever and ever, and I think will continue to be in the future. Interestingly, I think when we do a lot of work with Woodside, but also in other use cases with other companies across the industry or even outside of the oil and gas industry and other industries, we often find a level of redundancy at the interface between two companies. So that sounds like somebody is inputting information into a system to produce a work request, for example. That work request is getting created, it's getting sent to another company, often by email or some other way of communication. And then you'll find somebody in your counterparty, somebody else in that network, who is taking that information and re-entering it into another system. It seems like a very small example of redundancy, but it's everywhere. You see that kind of situation all over the place. If you add that all up, it adds to a hell of a lot of waste and also a lot of opportunity for miscommunication, misunderstandings, misinterpretation, which also gives rise to conflict effectively between you and your counterparty, where you have information that effectively is not the same as their information, or vice versa. And ultimately, it kind of leads to a less efficient operation. It has softer and more important impacts, like it can contribute to a breakdown in trust over time, for example, or a misalignment of expectations. All of these things are difficult to manage, and at the end of the day, they cost you time, money, they introduce risk, and they ultimately put different, no one wins, right? Both parties are usually not meeting their overall performance objectives. When we look at optimizing the flow of goods and services, and when we talk a little bit about Rise-X and why we sometimes, or how we differentiate against other enterprise platforms that people are probably already using. So most enterprise platforms, if not all of the enterprise platforms, are pretty focused on improving a process within a single enterprise. So they'll help you perform a function, sometimes as narrow as within a function, like specifically logistics, or it might be a finance application, or it might be a planning application, or it might be a maintenance application. So the application might have a specific function. Sometimes it might be cross-enterprise, but certainly limited to a single enterprise. And so those applications are trying to help you deliver productivity, but they usually are bounded by the enterprise, a single company. I think after many years of working in the sector with many different clients, we came to the realization that often a process, you can optimize your processes internally, but often the constraints for improvement, the dependencies have moved outside of your organization. So if you look at a supply chain process, is always a very good example. If the goal is to get something from point A to point B on time and within a certain budget, it's usually many companies involved in handling that material to get it from where it starts, its origination, to where it needs to be. And the trick is now coordinating and optimizing the flow of those materials through a network of companies, so through multiple entities, rather than just optimizing your own internal process. The logic there, if you're a fan of theories of constraints, is you could make your own organization go faster, but the overall process can't go faster than the slowest unit in the chain, or the slowest node in that network. And so we're very focused on enabling business processes across multiple stakeholders, across multiple companies in a network. I would say that's probably the most important thing we do. The other thing that Huub reflected on is sometimes, and not sometimes, almost always, the business has a really long list of really good opportunities, so very small changes they could make to a process that would drive efficiencies, that would make everybody's life easier. It would save them time, it would save them money. Sometimes, not always, but very often, the barrier to implementing those changes is the cost and time it takes to make an amendment or to change the actual system itself, which ironically is not where technology started. So technology, if you think of it as an enabler for business operations, the ability to make changes to that technology quickly, so the ability to incorporate continuous improvement on an iterative, on an ongoing basis at a reasonably low cost, I think is an important feature of any enterprise application. Before we set up Rise, I spent many years in digital transformation with a company called Accenture. We did very large digital transformation projects, and anything that required some sort of process change, and often a system change, too often I think turned into a very big project. It cost a lot, it took a lot of time, and often that generated a barrier to improvement rather than an enabler for improvement. So quite novel, I think, the way we built our product. It's in the cloud, it's very modern. We use AI to help people build. We have a no-code interface to help you make changes to a process, but you can incorporate small changes into a process very, very quickly, sometimes in minutes or hours. So instead of having quite a large, expensive IT project, end users can actually start to change the process that's being executed on platform, based on feedback, of course, but they can make those changes, small changes, quickly and iteratively so that you get that general improvement over time as well. On that note, let me introduce you to Rise-X. So Rise-X, we are a company. We build a software platform, and we would call it a SaaS platform, software as a service product. It's a multi-party platform, so it means that it's designed specifically to be used with multiple companies in a network. The technology that enables that is what is called a distributed ledger, often would be referred to as a blockchain. And that technology allows us to create a common information record, not a single source of truth, as you will often hear people talk about, the holy grail of the single source of truth. In a supply chain, I don't think that exists, because you have many entities. They each have their own single source of truth. And so by definition, there are many. A common information ledger is slightly different to a single source of truth. It means many parties can publish information to that ledger, specific information to that ledger, and allow, so they can permission other stakeholders in that network to read that information. So then you do have a single source for information, but it is common to multiple stakeholders. And so it allows you to exchange information between companies in a very efficient and very effective way, especially in a supply chain optimization or a supply chain operations context. What do we do as a company? So specifically, we design, build, and operate the platform. We call that platform an ecosystem orchestration platform. I don't know what they called an enterprise resource platform before there was a term for it. But as an emerging branch of types of platforms, we build what is called an ecosystem orchestration platform. If you're trying to conceptualize that, you can imagine it's sort of similar in its objective to an ERP. We're always focused on productivity. We're always focused on improving the flow of goods and services, or optimizing resource allocation across different nodes, different companies. But instead of an ERP, which the E in ERP is for enterprise, it's focused on a single company. We want to make sure we're focused on optimizing the flow of goods and services across a network of companies. Hence the term ecosystem. We look at networks of companies that exist in an ecosystem. And orchestration, we use the workflows on platform to help manage, communicate, and coordinate who needs to do which task at what time, and then have a good understanding, good context of what the impact, what the flow on downstream looks like as well. What do we try and deliver for companies who use our product? We look at integration of processes, teams, people, cross functions, and then again cross companies. So we often focus on making sure we can connect multiple companies, which is also multiple processes and multiple systems, into that common piece of flow. So everyone's operating with a common understanding. It does deliver transparency through that supply chain. So you get to look through your supply chain and you understand where things are, where they're leaving, where they're going, what state they're at, who's responsible for doing the next task, which helps with expedition, exactly what is going on. So the context behind every movement, behind every transaction, behind every process, which means it's easier for groups of people to collaborate together to ultimately make decisions quickly. At the end of the day, both you as an oil and gas company plus your supply chain partners actually all have a common goal, which is you're all trying to move stuff from point A to point B at the right time, make sure that it's there to support operations. We generally don't start with traceability as an objective. It's a very difficult problem to solve, but we do often end up providing traceability, so the ability to track and trace the movement of goods and services across different sectors. And for some stakeholders, not all, but for some, this is becoming more and more important as regulations in the sector change and put more onus on companies to understand where things are coming from and where they're going to. Certainly in some supply chains like critical minerals, automotive, so battery supply chains, there are regulations being imposed upon companies that they have to know exactly what materials went into producing a good, where they came from, however many, etc., and also where that good ends up so that they can recover it later for recycling or reuse purposes. Also, you have changing regulation, and these days it's becoming, I think, more dynamic and more challenging, where countries are also, let's say, the geopolitics at play results in things like rapidly changing tariff regimes, and the ability to then track and trace or understand where things are coming from, where they're going, and what the subsequent implications of that might be are very, very important. The ability to make changes to processes quickly so that you can comply with those changes in regulation quite quickly, I think is also very important, and that's where we think we have an advantage for anybody who's using our product over another one. Productivity, we always look at efficiency. Ultimately, we want the barrier to doing these projects to be very low, and so that's where the cost of making a change is very important to us. The lower we can make it, the better. But also, we want each of these little use cases to kind of wash their own face, because that allows us to tackle one kind of small problem. And if there's an ROI, if there's a net benefit from a productivity perspective, costs go down or efficiency goes up, risk comes out of the process, then it gives us the resources to tackle the next little use case as well. And slowly, as we move through one use case, we join all these things together, you end up with a much more coherent platform for managing operations in general. And of course, we spoke about a changing world, changing landscapes, changing regulations in different jurisdictions, but often resilience and agility. So the ability to be able to adapt to changes in the environment quickly, both from an organizational perspective, but also the ability to make changes to your processes and systems to enable that or to accommodate that quickly is becoming an agenda item for many of the people that we work with. Again, we don't do that all by ourselves, but the technology is a good enabler for helping companies achieve those goals and objectives. So that's a little bit about Rise. We build a platform. That's what the platform delivers. If I try and make that tangible in terms of what we actually do, so when we partner with companies like Woodside, how do we actually work together? Well, we follow a pretty well understood approach. I think most people will have come across it these days, but we're very agile. We focus on making iterations very quickly, sometimes in a few hours, in a few days, a few weeks, but not longer than that. And we basically do three things, and we do them kind of consistently. So we build stuff on platform. The platform has specific features embedded in it. In particular, the two features that are good enablers for this phase are we leverage AI as an accelerator to help you build and deploy processes on platform very, very quickly. And that sounds something like you ask the platform, hey, can you please build me a sourcing and procurement workflow to manage the contracting and operations of drilling services in the Gulf of Mexico? And the AI agents will go away. They'll do a bit of research on the internet. They'll do a little bit of research on local rules and regulations. They'll do a little bit of research on best practices in that particular use case. And then it will build a process on platform that you can publish a couple of minutes later. And that system will be an executable system. So it won't only codify the process, in the sense it won't only manage the governance of the process, but it will actually be a system where you can fill in forms, push buttons, follow the bouncing ball, and actually execute work. So as an enabler, the artificial intelligence is very useful in that context. The other core feature there is a no-code editor. And so it means that without any knowledge around coding, an end user can actually build this process, can manipulate the process, change fields, move steps around, introduce new steps, take steps out, etc., 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 put controls in place from a governance perspective. They can do all that in a no-code editor. And so you don't need a very specialized IT skill set in order to be able to build and deploy these business processes on platform quite quickly. The second thing we look at is then connecting. So once you've deployed a process, which can take a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of hours, but hopefully not longer than that, then we look at starting to connect that with the actual broader context. And that means we connect different individuals from different companies. So it's focused on people, it's focused on processes, and on also systems, right? So these processes effectively help you manage workflow between different people across different teams and different companies. And so that bit's very important. There's an element of integrating people and process there, but also we collect and control lots of information. And some of that information needs to go back into existing source systems, and or it needs to come from existing source systems. So we also integrate with existing enterprise applications, whether that's SAP from a finance perspective or from a maintenance point of view, or whether it's something like Cabal, which has a good footprint in the drilling operation space, or whether it's any other application that's already being used that we need to pull from or contribute to, then we look at working with companies to help them do that as well. And finally, as Huub mentioned when he was talking through some of the benefits he gets, all of the information is data on platform. And so as long as you execute the work on platform, then you have a lot of information about the performance of those processes. How long do certain tasks take? How well do certain entities perform in a workflow? And that gives you the information you need to be able to work with the right people at the right time to sort of de-bottleneck and remove constraints from that process on an ongoing basis. Of course, there is a feedback loop there, which is why the iteration is very important. But you can, of course, that information goes back, often means you need to make a change to the process. And so you're back at build, connect, and optimize. And so hopefully you can start to appreciate the flavor of there's a continuous process or a continuous improvement kind of mindset to the way that this application works as well. With that, I think we're kind of about tracking on time. So I'll share a quick video, which is a video we produced together with Woodside. It introduces the application SmartFlow, and so it should give you a little bit of a flavor for all the things that we've been talking about. It runs for about 4 minutes, and then I think we can move straight into the Q&A. All right. Let me see if this works. How slick can we make it? Hopefully you guys can all hear the sound. Let me know if you can't.
It's time for us to transform. We need to become a simpler, smarter, and stronger company to be globally competitive and to meet the challenges of the energy transition. Right now, at the King Base supply base in Dampier, there's a great example of how it can be done. The team has just launched a blockchain technology called SmartFlow that has reshaped the way we supply and deliver fuel. It's saving time, money, and most importantly, making the work easier for everyone.
BSB is a logistics supply base. We service the offshore assets for Woodside as well as the gas plants. The fuel supply is very important. It's operational critical, so we need diesel to power our vessels that go offshore, and the gas plants also require fuel for their facilities and equipment.
For a simple process where you transact fuel, we were experiencing a lot of errors and just a lot of manual labor. So we took a gamble and went into a project with the company called Rise-X based in Perth, and we started mapping out something that's now called SmartFlow.
So SmartFlow allows companies to collaborate in a real-time environment without having to move information into a third-party system. It's kind of like people trying to build a puzzle. In SmartFlow, it's as if we bring all those people together in a common environment and allow them to put that puzzle together and form the full picture.
This is the new, it's called SmartFlow, and it is awesome. A lot better, a lot more smoother than what we used to do. This is the app here that I have on my screen. Fuel has been ordered. It's been confirmed to say, yes, it will be put on the vessel, and the bunkermen, they have tablets, and once they put the fuel on, they will send an email to the vessel. Chief engineer needs to confirm to say, yes, he's received that amount of fuel, and then it will go to the wharf to goods receipt.
Confirming goods receipt and submitting. Done.
It's made our job a lot quicker and a lot easier, and because all of the information is in one spot, it's a lot more efficient.
It's a bit of a game changer for the fuel contract. It was previously very manual, had a lot of errors. Now we can easily see in the system who it's with, where it's at, how long it's been there. we can chase them up and fix errors as they arise instantaneously.
So far, we've delivered about $8 million worth of fuel across the platform, and we've managed to reduce the cost of managing that contract by more than half. SmartFlow works for fuel, and it will also work for water, liquid nitrogen, chemicals, bulk goods and materials, and even services.
This technology will definitely make Woodside a different type of business. It enables us to do things that we didn't do before. We can use the data to understand patterns. For instance, if you want water and the boat is going to a platform, you might also want fuel. So we can connect those things digitally. But it's also exciting to see that people that have been working in the same process for the last 20 years, that was very comfortable to them. So you can see it allows them to do more efficient, more fun things at work as well.
Fuel is just the beginning. With technologies like SmartFlow, we are moving towards an intelligent supply chain that uses data and insights to allocate resources in the most efficient and effective way. And that gives us the opportunity to really focus on the big challenges we face.
With that, I think that's the end of our presentation. I would like to thank Huub before we move into the Q&A. He's in Houston at the moment. He was originally planned to be in Perth when we started the logistics of this. In Perth, it's a lovely time of day. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. In Houston, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. So thank you very much, Huub, for joining us and taking the time. Much appreciated. And then I think we can hand over to Vincent. Vincent, if you want to help us facilitate that Q&A session.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for this presentation. We actually have some interesting questions coming in. I think, Rowan, you can actually see them in the Q&A, but Huub cannot. So what I'll do is I'll just read them out for both of you. And then you can decide who's best placed to answer it. The first question is around connecting different companies. So what's the common required infrastructure for that connectivity?
That's a good question. So I suppose we as a platform try to provide that common infrastructure. So we pair a full stack product, meaning it's a very deep stack. It has a front end, users can interact with it. It has a range of services, a middle layer, bunch of services, and a bunch of different back-end technologies, call it different types of databases. One of the key technologies there is a blockchain technology, and that infrastructure allows us to kind of connect lots of different systems together using a smart contract, if you will, but using a technology that's very good at helping us to share information between stakeholders in a very secure and very permissioned way. So if you do share your information with a counterparty, you do control that. It doesn't go out into the public for anybody. You specifically have to invite them to participate in that process and to see that information. But that allows you to kind of share information on a piece of infrastructure which is distributed, which is common, and it allows your counterparties to kind of pick that up and or contribute to that information. So I think we are the common infrastructure, at least that is our hope. Yeah, if I think that's Catan. So Catan, if that answered the question, that's great. If you've got any follow-ups, please let me know.
Right, yeah, and just a reminder for all the others that joined late, so you can just type your questions in the Q&A section. You will not be able to see the questions, but Rowan and I will be able to see them. And maybe indeed, say maybe it's a linked question from the same person, Rowan, is that he's asking if, and I'm not sure if I interpret it correctly, but you probably can do that yourself, is the operate phase an option, or does Rise-X always have this role to operate? I guess it's operating the system as such, what he means, but I'll leave that to you to clarify.
Good question. Yes. I'll provide a view, and then maybe Huub can provide a customer view on what that sounds like. But we Oh, very happy not to operate, put it that way. We have quite a small team, and the simpler we can make the solutions and the more capability we can build inside our clients, then they can operate and continue to build out that platform. Ideally, touch wood, without us needing to be involved. I think there's an element of, from our perspective, the maturity of the product. And so we constantly work on making sure that product is as easy and as simple to use as we can possibly make it. And that journey will continue in future. And that should reduce the barrier for the need to have, professionals or individuals from Rise-X helping you operate, maintain, and develop that platform. So no, the short answer is no, you can operate and maintain it. That's actually our preference, right? We, at the end of the day, are a software company, not a kind of outsourcing company. Sometimes we do partner with companies who are like consulting style companies, and they may operate something on behalf of a client for a client, but it's not us. Certainly, if the client has the capability and the capacity internally, brilliant. That aligns very much with what we'd like to do from a long-term perspective as well. Huub has probably lived and breathed that experience, so he can probably add from his perspective whether that's true or not.
Yeah, no, I think, let's say what Rowan explained before, the way we can control and manage the let's say the workflows with the no-code builder, we can add it, let's say, tweaks ourselves. We hardly need, let's say, when a process is established, we hardly need Rowan's team anymore. I think it would only be like, let's say, making sure that the SaaS software is up and running, but that's always been the case. I think we then also start tweaking and optimizing it ourselves by changing it, which is quite good. I think in addition is like we don't need a whole team for these agile implementation processes. We can do it with the individuals that are normally in the process themselves. We don't need to set up like a whole sprint or something else. We can when we initially have a more complex one. But for optimizations, we can work on a use case. We can try it with all the stakeholders almost like instantly, and then we can decide if that's the change that we wanted, and then we would implement it straight away. So it's very quick, robust, user-friendly. I think the look and feel is familiar as well with applications that you use internally or that you come across in the Microsoft suite. So that helps also with the adaptability for other users. Maybe Rowan, I think the question in how do we onboard the other companies or how do we connect them? Actually, it is very easy. Let's say if I have to train people into a more complex system like Cabal or something else, you always get stuck a little bit on how people get access to the application or something else. I think in this one, it's quite simplified. Like it's all web-based. You get an invite. Once you got the invite, you're straight into the workflow. And by explaining the workflow, which is quite often very familiar to people already because they are doing these tasks via emails or everything else, they almost, I would say, the implementation times of these things are very quick. I've onboarded quite a lot of contractors lately. I just set up a half-hour call, and then after that, they start using the application, or I would say not the application, the workflow in the application, because that's what we want them to do. Yeah.
All right, great. I think we're almost running out of time. For those of you that have more questions, then I always recommend just to connect with Rowan directly after the call. There was also a question if the session is recorded. Yes, it is recorded, and it will be available on our platform either later today or at least before the end of this week. And you will also be able to see the video on the Rise-X page on our platform. I think we have time probably for one more question, and let me just see. Well, actually, there was one thing that maybe you didn't mention that during the presentation, Rowan, is that out of curiosity, did actually your tool originate in the oil and gas industry, or was it actually coming from elsewhere?
Yes, so the team actually has a really good background in the oil and gas sector. So I think when we started the company, we picked oil and gas just because we were comfortable with the industry. We felt like we had a good understanding of the industry in general, and also comfortable with the processes and also some of the challenges that we used to address in a kind of past life. So before we started the company, me and quite a lot of my team actually used to work at a company called Accenture, and we used to do these large digital transformation projects. We were focused on building capability and capacity in companies during the capital project phase. So we worked, I was very fortunate, lucky, I think, in my circumstances. And I was in Australia during the LNG boom, as it were, between 2010 and 2015, let's call it. We had, I think it was 8 LNG mega projects all being built at the same time. Chevron, INPEX, Shell, BG, Santos, a number of different oil and gas companies going through these very large, very complex capital projects. And we did a kind of project which was often labeled business readiness, but effectively establishing all the processes and all the systems required to run the operations, the capital project operations. I was started as kind of an reasonably junior analyst and then spent many years in those projects. Fascinating years, actually. I really enjoyed them very much and fell in love with oil and gas as an industry. I think it's a fascinating industry, but also just was frustrated by the number of consistent challenges that companies face when they're going through these particular projects. And it's over and over and over again. And they're just not easy problems to solve. As soon as you get this kind of multi-party environment, so many companies that need to work together, I think it sort of makes that challenge a little bit more difficult. But at the same time, we were obviously very into technology. We were a technology company deploying technology and some of the emerging technology at the time. So if you imagine Bitcoin came out in 2010, blockchain was kind of a emerging thing in 2011, 12, 13, 14. And at the time, we sort of started experimenting with architectures that would allow us to address some of these challenges that you find in the supply chain world. So a lot of that early tech use case for that tech was in finance, obviously. But if you want to transpose that use case across, it's very analogous. In finance, you're looking for ways to move information between peers more effectively and more efficiently. In supply chain and in logistics, you're often looking to do exactly the same thing, right? You're looking to move information between peers, between groups of stakeholders in a network more efficiently, more effectively. And you want to make sure that everyone has access to that information at the right time when they need it, and that it is correct, right? So if you make a change to it, it's verified and it's verifiable. And actually, that cross-company coordination makes a big difference. So yes, we originated in oil and gas. Now we work across different sectors as well, because as you can imagine, these challenges are quite broad and they're certainly not unique to oil and gas. So we do a lot of work in commodities in general. Probably hydrocarbons are always our favorite, but we also do hard and soft commodities. So we also do work in the critical mineral supply chain, different driver there, right? Probably less productivity and more so regulation, but not different problems, same problems. And it's the same technology that we apply. And just if we've got a minute left, I thought what I would quickly do is just show you how we make changes, just to bring that to life. So this is the test environment for the Woodside Energy project. There's a number of different workflows that we've built, and some of these workflows link together. I'll click on this manage contract workflow. This is one I just happen to be very familiar with. This view here is effectively an execute view. So we have a Kanban board. This forecasting bit is done by Woodside. The actual tracking bit is done by a counterparty. And then the invoicing bit is an invoice is sent by a counterparty to Woodside. And then that flows on into SAP for processing and for reconciliation. But if I show you if I wanted to make a change to this process, for example, and not everyone can do this. I can, Huub can, and a few other builders can, but obviously not everyone in the organization can, and that's very controllable. But I click on this builder, it takes me into a view of that process, which is now editable. And if, for example, I've decided I would like to collect some more information, perhaps I want to select I don't know, maybe I just want to add a date, another date for when I want these services to be completed. I can drop that date there. And then if I publish it, it's live. And so it's implemented in the system. And the next process I execute and send to a customer, it will include this information. It's quite configurable. So you can say, I'd like this date to have a time. I'd like it to be a required field. I'd like to give it a title, for example. And then we have a very small set of components, kind of on purpose, like Lego, fewest number of blocks, just to keep it simple. But out of those blocks, you can build very many different process flows, very many different workflows on platform and deploy them quite quickly. So on that note, I won't publish this because then I'll have to go and make a change again, but I'll delete that component and then make a publish. It will up-rev that workflow. And now whenever I do some new work on platform, so if I wanted to start a new job, I would come here and start work. And now I have a kind of live version of this particular flow, including any edits that I've made as well. I think
Right. Yeah. Thanks for showing that, because that was a nice addition to the question. Yeah. I think that was also showing how one of your clients can actually make changes there while the system is live. So thanks for showing us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good. Appreciate it. And over to you, Vincent.
Yeah, I think with that, indeed, we overran slightly, but this was really interesting, and thanks for showing this in-depth answer on the question. I can also see people stayed, even though we went slightly over time. So thanks for everyone, and surely this was very interesting. So once more, thanks to both of you for presenting today. Thanks for everyone that joined us. And if you're a member on technologycatalog.com, you will receive the invite for the next case study webinar, which will be in a few weeks' time. And we look forward to see you all then for the next webinar. And wishing you a great day.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us, Vincent. Much appreciated.